Tariffs drive companies out of China. U.S. executives move production to other countries amid the ongoing trade conflict. U.S. manufacturers are shifting production to countries outside of China, as trade tensions between the world's two biggest economies stretch into a second year. Companies that make Crocs shoes, Yeti beer coolers, Roomba vacuums, and GoPro cameras are producing goods in other countries to avoid U.S. tariffs of as much as 25% on some $250 billion of imports from China. Apple Inc. also is considering shifting final assembly of some of its devices out of China to avoid U.S. tariffs. Furniture maker Lovesac Co. is making about 60% of its furniture in China, down from 75% at the start of the year. We have been shifting production to Vietnam very aggressively, said Sean. What is his name? Nelson, chief executive of the Stamford, Connecticut company. Mr. Nelson said he plans to have no production in China by the end of next year. The moves by U.S. companies add up to a reordering of global manufacturing supply chains as they prepare for an extended period of uneven trade relations. Executives at companies that are moving operations outside of China said they expect to keep them that way because of the time and money invested in setting up new facilities and shifting shipping arrangements. Companies said the shift accelerated after the tariffs on many Chinese imports rose to 25% from 10% in May. Once you move, you don't move back, Mr. Nelson said. Yeti Holdings said it plans to move post-productions of soft-side coolers out of China by the end of its year. iRobot Corp said it would start a new Roomba production line in Malaysia this year. Crocs said it expects less than 10% of U.S.-bound projects to be made in China by next year, down from 30% in June. And diesel engine makers Cummins said it has avoided $50 million in tariffs expenses by moving some production to India and other countries. Imports from China fell 12% in the year through May. Compared with a year earlier, according to a U.S. Census Bureau, the biggest decline since the financial crisis a decade ago. The biggest beneficiaries of that decline have been other countries in Asia, where production costs are low, such as Vietnam, India, Taiwan, and Malaysia. Many of those countries have recorded sharp increases in exports, although there have been allegations that some of the added tariffs stem from goods made in China that were routed through these countries without significant alterations to avoid tariffs. U.S. imports from Vietnam are expected to reach $64.8 billion this year, up 36% from 2008, according to consulting firm A.T. Kearney. We're moving production to other parts of the world. Marvin Edwards, CEO of CommScope Holdings, said in June, the Hickory, North Carolina company is making antennas for sale in the U.S. at its plant in India instead of China. There is little evidence, though, of U.S. manufacturers bringing production from China back to the U.S., a move the Trump administration hoped the tariffs would encourage. While imports from other Asian countries have climbed, U.S. manufacturing output has declined 1.5% through May from a recent peak reached in December, according to Federal Reserve. The Institute for Supply Management said earlier this month that its manufacturing index slipped again in June to the lowest levels since 2016. If we were to try to do a factory in the U.S., it would be enormously expensive, said John Hodge, co-owner of Sea Eagle Boats, which makes 85% of its inflatable kayaks, canoes, and fishing boats through contract manufacturers in China. It took us 20 years to build up the supply chain in China, he said. Mr. Hodge estimated the 25% duty on his product that took effect in May would double the Port Jefferson, New York company's tariff expenses to about $500,000 a year. Crown Crafts analyzed manufacturing costs in a half-dozen countries before deciding to keep making its baby blankets in China, despite the tariff costs. It's very difficult to find a country that can do it competitive with China, Randall Chestnut, CEO of the Louisiana company, told analysts in June. More than 100 companies have asked the Commerce Department to waive the latest 25% tariff on their imports because they said they can't find suppliers outside of China. One is Zoom Telephonics, which said it lost $1.1 million during the first quarter as a result of the tariffs on the cable television modems it imports from China and sells through Amazon Incorporated. and other realtors. I don't think anyone making them in the U.S. I don't think anyone makes them in the U.S., said Frank Manning, CEO of the Boston-based company. We're bleeding.